21, 22.
Yeah, about that.
We are now live.
Welcome back to Senate Education, Tuesday, February 6th. Secretary Boucher, Mr. Carolus, thank you both for joining us. Talking about after school. So your comments on after school is what I believe the committee is, well, I believe you're looking to tell us and we're looking to hear from you. So please, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you. Hello again. Good afternoon again, Mr. Chair and committee members. It's nice to see you again. For the record, Heather Boucher, Interim Secretary of Education, and I'm joined by my colleague, Jess. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, folks. Jess DeCarlis, Director of the Student Pathways Division at the agency.
And you know her very well, of course. So thank you for the opportunity for us to testify on behalf of AOE today. I am happy to clarify AOE's official position on the proposed BAA language and, of course, answer any questions committee members have. And as I said, I'm also joined by Jess. And as you know, she oversees the division that oversees and houses the regulation of after school from the education side in the agency. So to be clear, AOE supports and proposed the following language for inclusion in the BAA. And I want to apologize. We sent this testimony over I don't even know if you got it yet.
We do not have any testimony.
Okay.
But did you send it to Morgan?
Yeah, it was sent to Morgan. So you might not have already gotten it.
Morgan, have you received it?
Yes, I uploaded it to the committee page. But
beautiful. Could you do us a favor also? Would you just email it all to us?
Yes, absolutely.
That'd be great.
And my apologies. We've just been double, triple booked, so trying to get stuff out to folks on time.
I do think if Morgan, if you're able to coordinate this pretty easily, maybe just bring it up on the screen as well.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
That way we
yes,
can
of course.
go through it. That was Senator Weeks's suggestion, ranking member.
That would be perfect.
That's not typical protocol. We don't normally put. I know, I get that. We don't normally put testimony up on the screen for whatever it's worth. So.
Please go ahead, Morgan.
Yes, one moment.
There we are.
Okay.
So Morgan, would you be so kind as to scroll down? Yeah, thank you. So the BAA language that we proposed is included here. In effect, the agency requested in the administration's ask that there would be a special fund created to administer this mixed delivery program that was legislated last year in the big bill in 2023. And then there's some detail there about how the monies in the fund shall be comprised. And there's some other components that kind of tidy up language with respect to this special fund, but this is the primary core of what we proposed and still support. The other piece I would say is that consistent with the big bill language, we've also shown here the parameters of the grant program. So they're to be used. And again, this language, or very close to it, was passed in 2023. So it shall be used to support a mixed delivery system for after school and summer programming. Eligible recipients can be public, private, or nonprofit organizations. Grants may be used for technical assistance, program implementation, program expansion, program sustainability, and related costs. Next page, Morgan, if you would not mind, I appreciate it. And then the grants may be used to directly target communities with low existing capacity to serve youth in after school and summer settings. And then this was a really nice gift to the agency that we were very, we didn't ask for it, but I believe House Education worked with the rest of the General Assembly to use up to $500,000 of those funds each fiscal year for well, I think we put in the clarification of each fiscal year for administrative costs to allow for the AOE to support the grant program. And we were also allotted using these funds, a portion of these funds, 2 full-time staff at the agency. And Jess can certainly speak much more articulately about where we are in the process of hiring those staff, the 2 roles they'll fill. And that was also a really great thing.
Senator Luke has a question, please.
Sure. Yeah.
And also, if you don't mind, I'm just still looking for it. Morgan, do you just mind emailing it to us?
Did you refresh it?
I did.
Thank you, Secretary
Thank you.
Boucher, for answering my myriad questions today. And your
Oh,
two,
of course.
thank you. So could you, sorry, you probably said this and I didn't hear you. Could you repeat when this amendment was written and to whom it was shared, to whom it was sent, and when it was sent and all of the, so like the details of that?
This proposed BAA language went in as part of the administration's proposal for the Budget Adjustment Act, like we do every year.
Right,
So
right.
every year there's a Budget Adjustment Act. And this year, so every department is asked, every agency and department is asked by the administration, like, do you have corrections? Do you have things for the BAA? And this was part of it.
So that was back in December, January?
This correction, maybe December, but it would have been for review for the General Assembly when you opened.
Got it. And it was sent to the House and the Senate?
It was sent to whatever the process is for the Budget Adjustment Act.
All right, yeah, that's what I'm asking.
I think typically those go to the money committees first.
Okay.
If
Because
you
it's
don't
the
mind
budget.
checking on that, only because sometimes things go to all different places. I mean, I'm not always very good at keeping track of things, so please, if you have time just to check into that, please.
For the record, Ted Fisher, Vermont Agency of Education, the agency's Director of Communications and Legislative Affairs. It's my understanding that the Department of Finance and Management first week starts the process on the BAA with the House Appropriations Committee as the house that initiates budget bills. We usually get asked to come in to account for our sections if we have one, and so we provide a testimony to them. And then the process moves from there.
I did a quick search for Boucher in my email. You might do the same. I don't see it, but we can check in with Morgan, do some searches.
I did just send it to all of you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
It's on the
yeah,
web.
yeah, great. Sir, do you
Do I have one?
follow?
No.
Please continue.
Okay, and also, Mr. Chair, it would probably have come from Maureen, so I'm not sure my name would
Okay.
necessarily capture it.
Yeah.
So the ration, and by the way, just to repeat, Section B aligns with language that was already passed by the legislature in the big bill of 2023. So our whole rationale for this BAA language request is that it's, in our minds, it's simply to fix language from last year's big bill that we did not catch, I guess, either that we believe was either mistakenly or somehow unfairly, somehow, in our opinion, restricted the cannabis tax revenue that, in the administration's mind, partnering with the legislature, was supposed to actually be for a variety of partners to apply to those funds, just like we talked about in the parameters of the grant, that because it got put in the ed fund, then it's only able to be directed to LEAs because of the legal parameters of the education fund, because there wasn't notwithstanding language. So when I learned about this, again, Jess, and some of the financial folks in the agency alerted us and said, this is a problem. The way that this is stated, public, nonprofit, public, private, I think is the order, and nonprofit, there's a problem. What do we do with this?
Just a second, Senator Gulick wants to jump in, and then Senator Hashim.
So just to clarify, Secretary Boucher's the problem that you believe or the agency that the money will go to LEAs and never leave. Is that the issue?
It's not about whether it would never leave. It's about that the grant itself was to have applicants that are those three entities, and education fund dollars cannot go directly to those entities. They can only go to LEAs. So the whole idea from the administration's perspective.
And LEAs can't partner with community nonprofits?
They could, but that's a different grant process than was written into law. There's nothing in the law that gave the agency the ability to say we are only going to award funds for this program to LEAs. So we have a fundamental disconnect between the language that was the intent of this particular grant program and the way the funding was assigned for it. That, in a nutshell, is our challenge.
I hear what you're saying, but I also know from personal experience, and I think this is the case around the state, that LEAs naturally partner with local nonprofits to provide after school and summer programming.
They do. And we also have some great examples now, as I'll get into with my testimony, of community entities partnering with LEAs the other way around. So the whole point we're trying to actually convey is that we need as much flexibility as possible so that local entities can decide who's going to be the fiscal agent, what makes the most sense, who has the best capacity to do this work, and so forth.
Senator Hashim.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify something for 16 VSA 4018. I think you were quoting or citing section B, subsection 1, regarding the eligible recipients. Is it the AOE's understanding that you must disperse these funds to LEAs, nonprofits, and private organizations?
They are listed, and it's not in Title 16. It's actually in the budget bill of last session. So I don't know if that becomes permanently Title 16 or if it's session law, but that's what we're referring to. So if I could also continue my testimony, this is part of a multi-year focus on trying to build a statewide tapestry of universal after school that is flexible, that has many different organizations and partners working together. So
Madam Secretary,
that would be substantially different.
Right, I just want to make sure Senator Hashim is, do you want to follow up, or did you want to?
I've got a full page of questions,
Okay.
but I'd like you to
All right.
finish your
All right.
testimony so we can also hear from Mr. Careless.
Sure. So I talked about the rationale a little bit, and when I think this was late summer, fall, when we realized that the funding source, in our view, was a mismatch between what the intent of the legislature's past program was, I actually contacted the JFO and said, this is a problem. How do we want to handle this? They agreed it was a problem. And they also worked with members of the General Assembly who conferred and came up with the idea that to actually meet the grant as it was specified, the intent of the language, then a special fund needed to be created. So there was agreement between the JFO and the General Assembly back in the summer and fall that yes, there was a disconnect between the intent of the original grant language for this program and not the grant language, the intent, the statute language about setting up this grant and the way that the funding from the tax revenue had been allocated. So the other piece I wanted to make sure that I talked about, and I alluded to this just a moment ago, is this is not a program that just emerged out of, a brand new kind of idea or suddenly we wanted to have this kind of mixed delivery system. Instead, this is just the latest in a series of joint efforts between the administration and the General Assembly to leverage both federal and state dollars to build a system that is the most flexible so that, again, at the local level, local actors can determine what is the best way to set up not only after school, but also summer, before school, vacation, those kinds of programming opportunities for students as well. And so the AOE got involved in this much more directly starting in 2021 with a partnership with Senator Sanders, leveraging $4 million of the initial tranche of ESSER funds to launch the Summer Matters program that really was focused on re-engaging youth during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. I did some analyses. That analysis is kind of a strong, but we actually have a dashboard that I'm happy to come and walk the committee through. And I know at the time we were looking at the projections from ESSER 1 and then looked at it again for ESSER 2. And at that time, it looked like LEAs through their own ESSER dollars. Remember, I think 90% of the total ESSER dollars went to the LEAs. So there was about $13 million that was being intended for after school and summer programming with the LEAs. And so that's why the Summer Matters program was trying to focus on partnerships and then also other entities in addition to LEAs who also had resources from ESSER themselves to put forth for these kinds of regional and local programs. We continued the investments in after school and summer programming, $4.7 million in after school and summer expanding access grant. But I think, Jess, this is the one that you told me that's actually an underestimation, right? Is that correct?
No, I was referencing the 1% requirement, the
Okay.
2.8.
So that the next one in 2023 is ARP ESSER for summer and after school grants directly to LEAs, including the expansion of 21C programs. And we were directed to do that in ESSER, which is great. And that one is not 2.8. That's what I was asking, Jess. What did you tell me? This is the half of what it was, I think, right?
Right. 1% for after school, 1% for summer. So 2.8 million for after school, 2.8 million for summer.
Senator Gulick has a question.
I'll ask the same question I asked earlier today. I don't understand why we keep invoking ESSER and ARPA funds. They were COVID era federal dollars that had a begin date and end date. And what we're looking at today is something that will be in perpetuity. So why do we keep discussing ARPA and ESSER? How is it germane?
It's germane because it's how we're building a universal after school system across the state. So we've been blending.
Can I please just say, no one is arguing with building a multi-pronged, multi-tiered, what do we call it, mixed delivery system. No one is arguing with you about that. What we're talking about today is how the dollars are going to flow.
Yes, and I'm giving some history on that.
Yeah,
I'm giving
okay,
some history on how we've gotten to where we are,
history.
which I do think is germane.
Thank you.
Please continue.
Let's see. I just wanted to note that these resources are in addition to continued ongoing state funding sources through 21C, community school programs regulated by the AOE, in addition to a whole section of largely CFAP funded registered licensed programs under CDD, which I can't really speak that well to because that's not our purview. So the Child Development Division also licenses and regulates after school programs, and they've all also been part of this tapestry. So that's the whole reason I'm going through this, because we're building, we're trying to cover every part of the state. We're trying to actually leverage every dollar that we have to actually make sure that all students, all children, all youth have access to engaging, wonderful experiences. Next, Morgan, please. Thank you. That's just more of a section about, the other thing I would note is this funding, this mixture has been widely and jointly supported for years by both the administration and legislature as the model, as the concept of what we're trying to achieve. And the model directly aligns to the recommendations of the legislature's own report from its Universal After School Task Force Committee. And this model has also received positive national attention. So from the administration's perspective, the goal of these cannabis funds was to actually continue this mixed delivery model where it's not just one of those three entities that has access to the funds. It's any or all of them partnering together. And I think that that's really the crux of the challenge, that it feels like a real departure for the administration that we would be dialing this back, this approach, and only using these state dollars to be awarded to LEAs. That's a very different program than what we've been envisioning this whole time. Any questions about that?
Not seeing any.
We do have the current program of interest. The cannabis program, funded program, is up. We have a caveat there that all of those applicants are welcome to apply, of course, because that's what, again, 2023 law stated. But we do have a caveat that says funds aren't going to be released because we're trying to fix this issue. I have heard that that may be having a chilling effect on applicants, which is unfortunate. We also have absolute priorities 1, 2, and 3, and Jess can certainly speak a lot to these details because her and her team are the leads on putting all of this good work together. But before I turn it over to Jess, I did want to register the significant concerns that we, the agency and the administration, have. So running all the funds through the LEAs, as has been advanced by some as a solution, we believe would severely limit local options and hamper the flexibility that was called for in both the General Assembly's own legislative report on universal after school, as well as the collaborative interagency work on after school that has been ongoing for several years now. The final statute from 2023 session, in fact, did not authorize the AOE to award LEAs any funds first, to force LEAs to be sole fiscal agents on behalf of nonprofit or private entities, which we believe would be an unfair and tall order for them, or anything of that sort. It is clear that the intent of the program was always to have a robust set of applicants eligible for the program, in keeping with the goals of developing a universal tapestry of after school and summer options for all children and youth throughout the state, regardless of their geography. And the last piece I would say, if you will go down, Morgan, thank you, is that one of the other concerns we have is that we don't believe that the education system itself has the capacity to fully lift a universal after-school system. And I hear folks saying that that's not what is being contemplated either. Senator Gulick's point, well taken. One of the things I did want to point out, and I'm very happy to come back in and talk about these data with the committee. They're a little outdated now because they're pulling from 2020 data, but they really show that we have some significant gaps in coverage for our youth in the state. So this is a schematic using matching enrollment data in 2020 in our public education system by town and by county, with the number of slots for licensed CDD, childcare, and after-school programs. It's only after school, by the way, in this situation, in this analysis, and the data that we could have that fit, which was the number of students that are regularly participating in 21C. So it's definitely not a perfect analysis by any stretch of the imagination, nor would we argue that, but it's the best data that we could actually grab to try and look at what is the coverage looking like. And so in this case, with these rough data, it looks like, for instance, in Chittenden County, the biggest you've got about 77% of the towns in Chittenden County have a medium level of coverage, which is about 26 to about 45% of coverage. So that means that there's still room to grow there. They're not at 100%. But if you look, for instance, at Franklin County, all of their towns only get at maximum 25% of capacity covered by existing after school and summer resources there. So when we look at this, we're thinking about this tremendous variability both across the state, but also within counties. And that's what we're really trying to do, is make sure that all resources and all entities are leveraged to build this model together.
I have a question from Senator Gulick.
Yes.
I'm up again. So I don't know any school districts that have the belief that they could fully implement an after school and summer program on their own. I've never heard of that. I don't think that's a thing. I also just want you, if you could, to please dive in a little bit more about how you think running money through the LEAs would hamper the flexibility, because I can read into what you're saying there, and it seems to me as though you're not trusting LEAs to partner with their communities, and showing a distrust of the very folks that you support is disconcerting to me. You are the interim Secretary of Education.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments. I take them very close to heart, and that is not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying, as you had some great testimony from someone like Ms. I think her last name is Nolan at the King Street Center right in Chittenden County, is that it doesn't allow for a full fair, equitable distribution of state resources, because it puts LEAs in the position that they have to make those choices. They have to actually decide this is a worthy after school program or not. And frankly, after school programs are not only academic programs. And I think that that's really important to also point out. There are a lot of different activities that are part of after school and summer programming.
Is the Agency of Education better equipped to assess and judge local entities, better equipped than local school districts?
No, I believe that the local communities themselves are best equipped to do that, including schools, including their community partners, including schools that actually tell us over and over again they don't have capacity for new initiatives.
Senator Rashid, please.
Thank you. I wanted to actually touch on this capacity issue that you just brought up earlier. I'm kind of concerned here about the capacity of AOE. And for instance, we heard last year that there was concern that AOE didn't have the capacity to review homeschool applications, and we changed the law there. That's just one example. And I have concerns about AOE's capacity to manage the disbursement of millions of dollars if they're not able to manage the review of homeschool applications. How can you guarantee that AOE has capacity to manage this?
Yeah, I think that's conflating, Senator, two very different programs. So part of the challenge there is that the home study legislation was very, very complex and required significant hours for each application. So it's like comparing apples to oranges, although your point is well taken. I believe that this is exactly the reason that in-house education, they lobbied strongly and achieved to give the Agency of Education 2 brand new full-time employees to do exactly this work.
Okay, I have another question for you. On your memo, there are these 3 absolute priorities.
Yes.
Morgan, do you mind scrolling up to those, please? Now, applicants only have to meet 2 of these priorities, right?
That is correct. And I'm actually going to let Jess talk a little bit more about this because these were priorities that Jess and her team worked on and also collaborated with the advisory work group for the Universal After School Task Force. I'm probably conflating work group and task force there.
Thank you. So my question is on the final report from the After School Task Force. It says on page 7 that there should be an alignment and close partnership across schools, communities, and after-school programs. And there should be close collaboration between school staff and after-school staff. So I'm curious as to why is absolute priority number 1 optional?
Well, I think in this, the development of this is it possible, Morgan and Secretary Boucher, if you don't mind, if we could stop sharing just so we're not looking at little tiny people.
Sure.
Apologies, folks. So the development of this grant program has gone through several iterations. I think initially in reading the language of the law of Section 4018 and seeing the source of funds being the education fund, there was an intent or an attempt to try to meet the spirit of the quote unquote mixed delivery system by going back to the source of the Universal After School Task Force report and really highlight that community and school partnerships would be an absolute priority, with the idea that folks were coming in together in a partnership with the intent that LEAs would be eventually the recipient. Just in the letter of the law that the Ed Fund had that restriction. I think in a response from the advisory committee with the decision to pursue a BAA, we were tasked to make some redesign with the intent that there would be a special fund in place. And so we wanted to make sure that we weren't creating such a burdensome application that someone had to meet all 3 requirements, because when we look at trying to scale after school and summer programs, there may be no or low after school programs in a geographically isolated place, and there might not be a partner, but they could meet 2 of the 3 hurdles. So it was an attempt to try to meet the intent or spirit of the law while trying to operate within the bounds of the law.
I would also add, Jess, that it could be the case, as we've seen, that there's a geographic area that's really kind of barren in terms of after school, and there's no guarantee that a school or a school district would take advantage of these grant funds either. And so we were trying to keep that as open as possible.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I would go so far as to say that. I think what we find is in the geographically sparse areas, the school is the only game in town and offers the sort of infrastructure to support after school programming and unique individual partners, where we have 3 tiers of partners in our 21C program. You have kind of organizations, right? So right now we have, like, the Burlington Boys and Girls Club partners with our Burlington School District 21C program, as does the Sarah Holbrook Community Center. And they receive about $168,000 from Burlington School District as being a partner in delivery of after school. But that's where you've got big organizations. You then have programs like in Virgins, there's the art bus that might come in one time a week into the 21C program and provide arts programming. And then you have the sort of, you tend to have like an individual. So, and I think I've probably mentioned it at some point or another, but I always love this one because I went and saw it, is you have like a community partner who teaches kids animal tracking, right? And so frequently you find in the geographically sparse areas, the school has the infrastructure and can support community partners who tend to not be organizations.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking of areas that are really sparse when we look at our data. So components of the Northeast Kingdom, they don't have a school-based after school program. They haven't been able to lift one. There are plenty of schools where that's the case, for instance, in Orleans County. So again, what is most important to us is trying to be as flexible as possible, trying to make sure every school that has students, if they can't actually lift that program, then there's community partners who could.
Senator Rashid. Did I imagine you're happy about?
No,
Okay.
yeah, no, I'm good for now.
Okay, Senator, you, yes.
Sorry, just to make sure I heard correctly, Ms. DeCarolis, did you say that in the original intent, the LEAs would be the recipient of the monies, or did I hear that wrong?
So, when we develop programs, I can only use the actual text of the law. And in reading it, it was clear, and it says it in the statute, that education fund grants. And then in looking at when it talked about recipients, right? So public, private, or nonprofit, where we run into a conflict, right, is that 4025 restricts our ability to direct grant. But we have a longstanding model with 21C, which I do want to just note that there's been a lot of talk about history, but we actually have some state history with this. Senator Jeffords was one of the 4 senators who put forward the 21st Century Community Learning Center Act, which did not pass as an act, but was incorporated into the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, otherwise known as the ESSA, or Every Student Succeeds Act, eventually, and is Title IV Part B of that education, that federal law. And in that, that really was his intent, and I think the quote is that they wanted to put schools, make schools available again broadly to the community. And so it's a comprehensive center. It's not just academic programs. It's not just tutoring. It is a suite. And in fact, it's a requirement that you're offering very diverse programming. And that has been a stable, decades-long program in this state that has supported, now I think it's 21 SUs and 91 sites. It's been as high as 103 sites pretty consistently for going on a decade. It took a hit, obviously, like as many people did with the pandemic, and has supported up to 600 community partners. And in that, I think that model was a marker. And I think with the ARP ESSER, I think to Secretary Boucher's point, that it's a very valid point. It's going away, right? So designing to dollars that expire, isn't something that we want to do. But I think that pilot of, we asked SUs, we were required by law to have SUs compete for federal dollars under ARP ESSER, and they answered the call. So I think that, we have about 33, 34 SUs running only federally supported grant programs right now. But you know, I think the point is that in looking at how would we get these dollars out, a mechanism that has been proven is that we can award the LEA, and we should not use this term, like former CFOs would slap my hand, but as the fiscal agent who then coordinates the programming and partnerships. So that was just an attempt to make a vehicle to bridge this gap around the restriction of direct granting ed funds. A decision was made not to do that, to pursue the change, this BAA change instead. But that was one strategy in order to make this a viable program. No one would be forced. It's a competitive application. People have to elect and submit applications, so nothing's foisted on anyone. And it's something that we've done historically.
And I would also add, I think those are great points, Jess. I would also add that because we are a small state minimum, we get small state minima. Our 21C programs have not been able to meet the need throughout the state. And I think what we're again trying to do is to supplement that system. We used to have a pattern of actually having LEAs be the fiscal agents for a variety of different kinds of state grants. And when I first came to the Agency of Education, there was a clear decision that was made that this was actually putting the LEAs at significant risk, because if they were not actually running the programs, but they weren't having actual contracts or things like that, it really was a raw deal for them and they were at significant risk. And so I think that that's something that is, we want to avoid that.
That's
I
been
want Senator Hashmi to jump in while he has a thought there.
I'd like to talk about the contracts between LEAs and nonprofits. Are you, I want to make sure I heard, were you saying that LEAs are not entering contracts, but are still partnering with nonprofits and private organizations? Or did I
I'm
miss
saying
something?
when I first came to the agency, there was a habit, a long-standing habit, so this was 8 years ago, of work being done by external entities, not even necessarily in the after-school space, like say an entity that was providing theater or things like that, as one example. The LEA was actually on the hook and had accepted the cash, so to speak, on behalf of that entity, but they really had no oversight of the program. There was nothing like that. And so I think that's very worrisome. It actually, we could bring Cassandra Ryan in to talk about why that's a problem. I mean, I think that's something that we need to be very aware of, and we don't want to actually build a system back up that looks like that again.
So,
But can I just clarify though, just because I don't think this is what you're saying, Secretary, because you're talking about past, right? This is not a risk right now. This is not how this program was designed. We have very established protocols, MOUs, partnership agreements, etc. We've been doing that for years. So
we do, but this program was not designed solely to give the dollars as well to the LEAs. So we're just going to have to agree to disagree on that, I believe.
So if dollars are going to LEAs and the LEAs are partnering with nonprofits and private organizations, and the LEAs are then giving that money to the nonprofits and private organizations, how?
It depends on the funding source. It depends on the funding source, Senator Hashim. There are many different ways that there are existing funds, federal and other. There's a whole, as I've already mentioned, there's a whole program of after school and summer programming that occurs in CDD, which we're not really speaking to because it's not our set of programs. So there's no one answer for how this looks, is I guess what I'm saying. It depends on the funding source. It depends on the parameters of that particular funding stream. The beauty for us of having this cannabis revenue that multiple applicants could actually apply to is it removes the federal requirements we have for massive reporting, which is usually what puts a lot of our LEAs over the edge. And it gives us some flexibility to be nimble from year to year in what we actually want to support, given that they're state dollars.
So I'm curious about the oversight piece that you had mentioned. What types of oversight does AOE provide after, if this language were to go through, what type of oversight would happen after these grants are dispersed?
Well, just like we do oversight of any entity that signs a grant using federal or state dollars, they would have the same assurances that they're signing up for. They would have reporting requirements to the agency. We do have a process internal to the agency that actually identifies high risk recipients of grants, and then there's additional auditing and findings of that nature. So I think that, and we've actually done this with nonprofits under Act 112. I think I'm mixing up the numbers, but the mental health grants that went out to nonprofits as well as schools. So we have this mixed delivery model. We know how to do that. We've been doing it for the past 3 years plus.
You also talk about the anti-discrimination requirements that are in the grant process.
Yes, and that's a deep concern to us. We would not be interested in funding discriminatory applicants. We have to work within the parameters of the law. And so what we've put, what I shared in the testimony today is that we have included language that our general counsel is comfortable with in terms of meeting law. But we're also happy, and that's currently in the grant application itself that's up for applications. Those applications are due in late March. So we'd be happy to continue that conversation. I know that there's been a bit of, I think, some folks not interested in discrimination language, I think, in other parts of the Senate. So we look to, the General Assembly as a whole to kind of work with us on that. But we share the concern about discrimination. We're not interested in fostering a discriminatory environment for any children or youth or students in Vermont.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. Can you tell me which rules would apply to this? Which laws?
Yeah, I think I have the language right there. I don't have it memorized. It's actually in the testimony that you have. I don't know if Morgan, you want to pull that back up.
No, not necessary. We've got it.
Yeah.
Questions? There. Yeah, please jump in. Gentleman to my right, any questions?
No, we're taking it all observing.
All right.
I generally just want to say thank you for testifying, and
Yeah.
to be honest, I'm very disappointed in Secretary Boucher in your testimony, but I also appreciate that you came and spoke to us, and I appreciate that Jessica Carolus was here as well, and that you two also may not agree on everything, and I know that's not always easy, so I appreciate all of us sitting in this discomfort right now around this issue.
Yeah. Synergy.
Thank you. So I'm seeing that the anti-discrimination statutes section is citing the task force report. And I'd like some further clarity as to what actual statutes do apply, because I'm not seeing, at least at first glance, I'm not seeing what anti-discrimination statutes apply. So I guess my first question, would the IDEA apply to a private organization that receives a grant?
No, it couldn't. An IDEA is only applicable to LEAs.
Okay.
Unless they're approved independent schools that are obligated under our 2200 series in our state law to comply with elements of IDEA.
Okay. So IDEA would not apply to private organizations, but they would.
And that would kind of make sense, because IDEA is about accommodations for academics, which is why they're housed within schools.
Right. I do believe that after-school programs are academic in nature. It sounds like there's conversation to set a foundation to establish that they're not academic.
I think they have academic components. I don't think that's the full gamut of what their purpose or what they offer is.
All right, so IDEA doesn't apply. What are there other anti-discrimination rules, statutes, or protocols in place that would protect students who go to private organizations that are not partnering with LEAs?
I'm not equipped to answer that because I'm not an expert on discrimination broadly outside of the education field. So I would encourage us to bring back either our general counsel or perhaps Ledge Counsel to talk about that, where and when federal ADA requirements apply. Those would be the typical federal laws that I would think would apply. But again, I'm not an expert. I'm only an expert
Sure.
on education.
Mr. Careless, do you have any input on that?
She frozen? I think she's frozen.
Uh-oh.
She's, we can't have folks in. I know Senator Kitchell's also looking at adding some anti-discrimination language. I wonder if Mr. Careless. Yes, please, Mr. Fisher.
For the record, Ted Fisher, Vermont Agency of Education. I was going to offer Senator Hashim for us to share some language that we worked on with your colleagues in the House, which I believe I understand is going to be similar to the language that your colleagues in appropriations are considering. So one is, so that language that you have in the Secretary's testimony, which is also in the grant application, just warns applicants that they may not discriminate, right? Based that one of the conditions of applying is that you're not discriminatory. One. So when we were talking about this with the House, when House Appropriations was considering the BAA, what ended up getting drafted was 2 sections, and my computer has died, so can't pull it up, but I'd be happy to email it to you. That generally just says that state and federal laws on non-discrimination would apply to all applicants of the program, regardless of whether they fit into either of the 3 entities. And then we worked with, it was actually some ideas from some of your colleagues in the House to apply the Public Accommodations Act to all applicants, regardless of whether they meet the definition of Public Accommodations Act.
Ted, will you mention our colleagues in this? Can you just say which committee, just so we.
Sorry, yes, apologies. House Appropriations was the folks that we worked with on the language, and the reason why we asked to review any non-discrimination language because of concerns about potential litigation. And so we got to a set of language that we're comfortable with. It's my understanding, although I haven't heard directly, that Senator Kitchell and her colleagues in appropriations may be considering similar language, which we would be comfortable with. If the General Assembly would like to do different non-discrimination language, we ask that you allow us to review it just for concerns about discrimination or due to litigation concerns.
Yeah, I mean, I think having some further review makes sense. I feel like this is substantially more than a small technical change. And this is something that should be in a committee for further discussion and deliberation. But I see Mr. Careless is back. Mr. Careless, did you hear my last question by any chance?
I did not. I apologize.
No problem. I was asking about the anti-discrimination rules that do or do not apply under this proposal. So I was just wondering if you could share any information you have about what rules would or wouldn't apply to private organizations or nonprofits if they're receiving grants directly from AOE without a contract or partnership with an LEA.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think inconsistent with a question that I think was raised in House Ed is there are going to be some differences that we'll have to contend with. And again, I would recommend, certainly not to rely on what I have to say, and the Director of Special Education would be an appropriate person. But I think for schools, when we think about curriculum and extracurricular activities, accommodations and supports don't sort of end just with academics, right? So a school would not be off the hook just because something's happening after school if the school is offering it, right? When it comes to providing supports and services. But I think, as Secretary Boucher had said, we can't hold a private entity that's not governed by under IDEA to IDEA because it doesn't apply to them because they're not a school. Whereas I think components of the Rehabilitation Act or ADA would apply depending on the environment. Just like with colleges, they're held to a different standard under Section 504 than secondary schools or K-12 schools are held to, right? So we have students who are in flexible pathways in early college or dual enrollment. The school is still the entity that is obligated to provide services and supports versus necessarily that the college suddenly takes on, the provision of special services under IDEA. So there are going to be differences related to the type of entity. And certainly we know that entities also, depending on what type of entities they are, may have different obligations under Title IX or Title VII.
Thank you. Yes, Secretary Boucher.
I just, I don't know if we're getting close to moving on, but I wanted to just have a closing thought that I didn't get a chance to say. And I think it's really important, particularly given some of the comments that have been made. So when we're actually doing all of our work at the Agency of Education, and perhaps even more clearly this kind of work, which is about interagency collaboration, it's about helping foster partnerships at the local level to the extent that we can. What is at the center for us is children and what's best for children, what's best for students. So, it's really, I will say on the record, it's really tough to be potentially accused of not supporting the education system when I've been doing this work for 8 years. But I also have a duty to the children of our state that's actually part of our Constitution. And I actually have to take that role very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
I just want to go back to the very beginning. Sorry. So right now, under AOE's interpretation of the law, can LEAs receive funds from this grant program?
We would argue that there needs to be some kind of correction to align the intent of the grant program with the funding source. We still believe that there is a fundamental disconnect between those two.
In which intent are you citing? Where are you?
The intent of this program being open directly to LEAs, public schools, to privates, which are composed of nonprofits and other privates.
And where is that intent language?
That is in the BAA of 2023.
Okay. I hear often how...
No, not the BAA, the big budget, the budget bill. Sorry,
right.
Excuse me. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm having trouble with that, this constant reliance on, past intent, because I regularly hear that past legislatures are not supposed to bind the hands of future legislators, but this was in last year's budget, you said?
Yes, but it's a little bit unique in that it was last year's budget, but we're hung up because we couldn't actually deploy the grant during the time it was meant to be deployed because we would argue that the funding source is messed up. So, and again, I would say, that's something for the General Assembly to work through.
Okay.
All I can say is this is our perspective, our take on it.
Okay, so it's just confirming, sorry to be redundant, but it's AOE. AOE is saying that under the way the law is written right now, you're prohibited from giving any funds or any grants to LEAs.
We are concerned that there could potentially be a real risk of having a lawsuit from a nonprofit or private that could reasonably argue that they were excluded from an application that was meant for them to be applicants to. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, Senator Gill.
I'm thrilled to hear that you care about children and they are at the center of all of this work. I couldn't agree with you more. Our school districts are at the center of this work. They connect with the kids in our community on a regular basis. They are governed by law in Title 16 as well as federal law to a very, very high level of oversight and criticism, frankly, let's face it. I would just posit that they are more aware of the needs of their community and their children than someone sitting in an agency in Montpelier, be it whatever agency. Choose the one that you would like. That is what I'm saying. And
I don't
You
think I disagree with you, Senator Gulick. All I'm
Okay.
saying is that those decisions should be left to the local level. How they actually want to make those decisions should, from soup to nuts, be made at the local level, with all partners having potential access to partner together in a way that doesn't privilege some partners over others at that local level.
Thank you both. Thank you, committee. I think this was a hopefully helpful conversation. Morgan, we're gonna leave it there, but we know that, I believe the BAA was passed, maybe voted out today, but I think there's gonna be maybe an amendment to it. How this is issued.